study, if you will, over at the Manhattan Institute. And we're going to ask him about some of the things you've heard most recently about how people believe they've bought their insurance, but they haven't paid the premiums, or they have, but the government hasn't put through the subsidy that would make that account payable because they don't know how much. He's going to explain it. He's also going to explain something we're about to hear regarding your doctor. Did you see Eazy-E last night or yesterday on Chris Wallace's program, Fox News Sunday? Eazy-E, what are you talking about? I'm talking about Ezekiel Emanuel, pardon me. Doctor is one of the architects of Obamacare. He was so honest yesterday. I like how they're forthright. I really do. Oh, sarcasm is the weakest form of humor, Crane. Come on. I know, but I mean, it's just the theater of the absurd. It's true. So we're going to talk about what he said, why it's not true, or why it is confusing and an attempt to rewrite history, or why it's a lie. Okay. And why it's important to you. Because we're all sitting there going, I got a notice the other day. And I was sitting there going, okay, well, what do I do? Trying to figure it out. Dr. Paul Howard will be with us. What about Newt Gingrich? What do you have to say about Mandela? I'm glad you asked, because he got blasted for it on his Facebook and his website. Why are you bringing this up? Because sometimes, as a leader, you've got to take positions that you believe in that are not always popular. But he explains what he feels and recognizes about Nelson Mandela. We're going to have that clip for you. We will also have big time Cheney. That's right, former vice president. Pulled no punches. And that means he just simply told the truth. Isn't that amazing? Like, he pulled no punches. Oh, he was out of control. He was crazy. Are we talking about Dick Cheney? Yeah, he was just simply telling the truth about President Obama's foreign policy, what he felt, or what he interpreted as the worldview of President Obama, not believing in American exceptionalism, and how he deliberately, President Obama and the supporters of Obamacare, deliberately misled the American people because they knew it couldn't be passed. What about the NSA? Glad you asked. Next hour, top of the next hour, we're going to be speaking with David Gardenstein-Ross. That's right. And he is a senior fellow over at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. And he's going to respond to what Senator Rand Paul said about the expansion of the Fourth Amendment. The NSA, our records. I'll also have him weigh in on Clapper and Israel. So we got a lot of mo there. But first I bring you President Obama with Tingles last week. Oh, come on. That's so juvenile. With Blondie. Come on. With Chris Matthews last week on Hardball, where he interviewed the president. Chris Woodward and I detailed this interview on Beat the Press. I got to post that clip. Anyway, here's the president talking about the presidency and what the role is of a president and how he's not discouraged, but he certainly understands what his job is in reference to history. Roll it.
Or Kennedy did. If you remember that person that you met who was down on their luck, but was of good character and was trying to figure out how are they going to support a family. If you remember that young child who has big dreams but doesn't yet know how they're going to get to college. If you feel those folks in your gut every single day, that will get you through the setbacks and the difficulties and the frustrations and the criticisms that are inherent in the office. I think the interesting thing about now having been president for 5 years is it makes you humbler as opposed to cockier about what you as an individual can do. You recognize that you're just part of a sweep of history. And your job really is to push the boulder up the hill a little bit before somebody else pushes it up a little further, and the task never stops of perfecting our union.
Is that bolder government power? I think it is. Now, whether you support President Obama's policies or oppose them, the question is, when he looks at pushing the boulder up, is he speaking to government power? I think he would have gone the route of France when it comes to statism, as opposed to what we have done and what he is a part of, obviously, as I'm a part of it, as any American is, on what our founders did, with recognizing human nature and not embracing statism. That's a key. Our founders understood that. It allows for limited government because by recognizing human nature that we're fallen and will manipulate the process to expand our own personal power and acting in our own self-interest, and recognizing that and recognizing our rights come from God and the importance of recognizing that as opposed to come from government, because government is us, as President Obama would say, then you keep the individual free. And that's a part of this. As he has become more humble. I don't know if he's become more humble. And this is not me sitting there with a pipe going, "Oh, get on the couch there, Barry." No, I don't do that. So I'm not analyzing him in the sense of psychologically. What I'm saying is, I look at his policies and I look at what he has done as the President of the United States. Again, not personal, just a reality of the policies that I'm responding to. The record. And I look at that and I think, okay, what has he done? He's increased the state's power. Has he respected the Constitution? No, not really. Whether it's the NLRB, whether it's not enforcing particular laws or mandates or changing those. No, he's taken on Article 1 functions as opposed to Article 2 functions that are outlined for the executive to execute faithfully the laws of the United States. I'll speak to this just a little later. In fact, when we talk about this later on tonight, this hour. But the question I have is, do you think that rock is government power? Push it up just a little further to get it going. Because that's what I see it as. Now, some people would say, no, it's about getting as much as you can for the good of the country. But he believes the good of the country is to have a ruling class that's dictating where some are more equal than others. Because he is the minister of fairness. He is the man who is going to determine what is equal, what that means. So, a thought there. Then President Obama pivots and speaks to individual rights and goes to the blame game. Well, if you don't believe me, he's in front of a group of young folks, hardball, the interview, and he turns and pivots. Here's what he has to say. Roll it.
But what makes me more confident than ever is the interactions I have with young people like this all over the country who still believe in this country, still are optimistic fundamentally about their futures, are problem solvers, are practical. The American people are good and they are decent. And yes, sometimes we get very divided, partly because our politics and our media specifically tries to divide them and splinter them. But you know, we got so much stuff going for us that as long as any president stays close to the people, I think they're going to do all right.
Okay, how has he stayed close to the American people? What does that mean? Did you hear that was tough. Did you hear about Tingles, what he said the other day, Chris Matthews, about him amongst us? As if he honored us with his presence? Now, what I get here is he goes back to these statements where he says the media tries to divide us. And he believes in the the group that's around him. He believes Americans are optimistic. But I don't believe he believes in the individual American. I truly don't. And I don't mean that as a jab to the man. I look at the record. He doesn't believe in Americans. No, he believes in the state. He believes in the government. He believes in America, but he doesn't believe in Americans as individuals making free choices. He just doesn't. Reality. But then he plays the blame game with the media. Here the president is, and this is going to sound a bit ridiculous. So, and Brent, just in case, hold my break because I want to make sure that we get this full clip in. The statement that he makes is economically, it is, how do I put this nicely? Absurd. But it's made more absurd because his own economic advisors have recognized this and put it in their work, be it academic or part of government research. So his own economic advisors have disagreed with him on the point that he is trying to make by the extension of unemployment benefits being an economic stimulus. Okay? Now, I'll explain this on the flip side of the quote. That's part one of the quote. Part two, and this is from his address this past weekend, is a comment made about Republicans. And you tell me who's dividing America. Roll it.
If Congress refuses to act, it won't just hurt families already struggling. It will actually harm our economy. Unemployment insurance is one of the most effective ways there is to boost our economy. When people have money to spend on basic necessities, that means more customers for our businesses and ultimately more jobs. And the evidence shows that unemployment insurance doesn't stop people from trying hard to find work. Just this week, the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office predicted that allowing benefits to expire will be a drag on our economic growth next year. A report by the Department of Labor and my Council of Economic Advisors estimated that it could cost businesses 240,000 jobs. And without the ability to feed their families or pay the bills, many people currently looking for work could stop looking for good. So extending unemployment insurance isn't just the right thing to do for our families. It's the smart thing to do for our economy. And it shouldn't be a partisan issue. For decades, Congress has voted to offer relief to job seekers, including when the unemployment rate was lower than it is today. But now that economic lifeline is in jeopardy, all because Republicans in this Congress, which is on track to be the most unproductive in history, have so far refused to extend it.
Okay, now earlier on the address he speaks to Congress, but he paints this very emotional picture of how the Republicans are heartless because they're not going to extend the benefits. And we understand there's a whole host of things when we talk about benefits and extending them, because historically we haven't extended them to the degree we have in the sense of 99 plus weeks. That said, Larry Summers was his top economic advisor, top assistant for economic policy. He wrote a paper in 1995, I'm quoting from an Alan Reynolds piece in 2009, where he explained that, quote, unemployment insurance lengthens unemployment spells. That is, when the government pays 50 to 60% of their previous wage to stay home for a year or more, many of them do just that. And so, interestingly enough, when you subsidize something, you get more of it. Alan Krueger co-authored, he's the Assistant Secretary of the Treasury, or was at the time, pardon me. I think he is now Chief of the Economic Advisors, but anyway, he's serving the President in the economic capacity of advice. Co-authored a 2002 survey of the topic with Bruce Meyer from the University of Chicago. They found that, quote, unemployment insurance and workers' compensation insurance tend to increase the length of time employees spend out of work. And he also found last August, Krueger and Andreas Miller, and this is, remember, 2009, of Princeton, also found that, quote, job searches increased sharply from 20 minutes a week to 70 in the weeks prior to the benefits exhaustion. Anyway, the reason I point this out is I can make that point 10 different ways. regarding unemployment insurance being an economic stimulus. But I wanted you all to know that his own advisors, and remember, we can even go back to the woman who looked like Mrs. Garrett from Facts of Life, blanking on her name, but she also wrote research that and authored work that contradicted the policies of President Obama. So his economic advisor, everybody knows these things until they get into the White House, and then they like the power. Jerry Boyer once pointed that out, how at a time, and I'm paraphrasing here, he was invited to the White House and asked to sign on something, and he just said he just couldn't do it. But there is opportunity to do it. And it was the growth and expansion of government. Bottom line, if you take a pail and you go to the pool and you take water from the deep end and scoop it up and then run down and pour it into the shallow end, what do you get? Do you get more water in the pool? No, you don't. In fact, research shows that for every dollar we spend, we get about 50 to 60 cents of it back. So it's not an economic stimulus because the government doesn't create wealth. Doesn't take a Rip and Einstein to understand that. Now, to the other point of President Obama blaming the media and then turning and saying, hey, and we'll go to break now. Hey, Republicans, he goes on about how many hardships this will create. And then he says Republicans are to blame for this because, in essence, they're heartless. So he makes false statements about the economic impact. He details the emotional argument that we all understand and feel when it comes to people who are struggling and being out of work. We certainly have them in our family. We know them. They're our friends. Sometimes they're just us. So bottom line, we get it. And in doing that, he fails to recognize that his policies have increased the likelihood for people to be unemployed. And why the unemployment number is going down is not because of job growth, seasonal job growth. It's because people have left the workforce generally. Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth, AFR Talk.